if you have enjoyed this episode of the Unexplained Rundown.
The Unexplained Rundown is pleased to partner with tpublic.com and bring you some fun and fantastical apparel and accessories that are truly out of this world. If you're keen to support the show and see it grow, be sure to check out some of the cool designs in the merch store and grab yourself a bargain. Use the link in the description below.
Concern you about the unknown and the unidentified flying object?
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on.
Do you have anything on the subject, sir?
No, I haven't had anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on. The flying saucers, and they've had other things, you know.
For years, the world has seen reality distorted, facts manipulated, and truth hidden. But there's even more to the story than anyone has ever suspected. Because no one has been able to see the whole picture. Until now.
Friends, welcome back to another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. I'm your host, Grant Lavac, and if you found this channel intentionally, then, like me, you're intrigued by the unexplained mysteries of this mortal coil of ours. You crave to know what's real and what's not. Sounding a little raspy tonight, folks, coming off the back end of the man flu. Seems to be a recurring pattern with every time I go live. So last month it was the dreaded Rona, and this month's the man flu. So Monday night, having a few of these. It's my kind of piss. Might explain why I got some of the videos mixed up at the front end. So apologies there if it was a little bit jumpy at the start. But as always, it's good to see some friends in the chat. So I want to say a quick shout out to Zane. Always good to see you, my friend. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your evening to tune on in for a short while. My main man, Jimmy, is always with us. So great to see you, Jimmy. Rotary Emotion. What's up, folks? Good to see you. And yes, no mention of drinking piss either tonight. So that's my last mention, I swear. And Jasmine, great to see you. Hi, everyone. This is Apple Juice, I swear. I got a few other folks joining us as well. So I want to say hello to, let's see if I can show anything that's actually clean and decent. We have Troubled Minds. Yo, welcome. Thanks for joining. So thank you again all for taking some time out of your Monday evening, if you're in Australia, for this another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. If you're across the pond, if it's your morning, your day, your graveyard shift, thanks for tuning in. As always, want to say a word of thanks to our very, very generous Patreon members, Jimmy, Jasmine, Clint, Shane, Dan, and we've got YouTube member Telekinetic. Thank you always, guys, for your ongoing support. I do really appreciate it. We're a very small channel. I only get a chance to do a live stream once a month to share with you what interesting things that I've found through my research and FOIA requests. So if you're new to the channel and you're interested with the content that I put out on monthly basis on a monthly cadence, consider subscribing to the channel. A lot of folks that watch the channel aren't members, so hit that subscribe button. And if you want to give it a thumbs up or share it with any friends or colleagues. If you're interested to see the channel grow, consider becoming a Patreon member or look at some of the membership options on YouTube. Links are all in the show notes below, folks. And if you are interested in starting your very own podcast or live stream, you can now, and you're interested to use the same streaming software that I use, which is called StreamYard, very, very easy to use, very schmick. You can get $10 off. There is a referral link in the show notes below. So I'll leave that with you. But tonight's show is all about the JFK files. And I was very, very interested to learn that Australia was referenced quite comprehensively in the newly released JFK files, the documents that were released by the National Archives on was it the 25th of March. So very, very interesting. And we'll be reviewing those documents this evening. Shout out to a few folks. TP Loft 2008 gave me a heads up on some of the documents that referenced Australia. Mario Noel, also on X, did put out some posts on X pertaining to Australia being referenced in the JFK files. So really, really interesting. I will say, if you are keen to have a look at a really good special that Ross Coulthart did for NewsNation only a few weeks back, Declassified the JFK Assassination. Fascinating viewing, some really good interviews. And one of the interviewees in that special was none other than our Aussie friend, Jeff Cruikshank. And I put a link in the description below to both the NewsNation special that Ross did, goes for about, I think, just shy of 40 minutes, around about that. And as well as the link to the reality check episode that Ross did with Jeff. So do check that out. Some very, very interesting commentary from Jeff, as always. But let's get into our documents. So, and by the way, all of these documents, you have access to them. They're readily accessible via the National Archives, website. I've put a link in the show notes below. There's about 80,000 pages, so I'm going to leave it to others out there that have the time, the energy and effort, the blood, sweat, and tears to go through it. I'm quite happy for others to do that. I don't have the time to go through it. But these documents that reference Australia did catch my interest, so I'm keen to go through them with you this evening. So where do we start? Well, let's have a look at one of the documents that was released. There's quite a few documents in this tranche. I'll pull this up. We'll start with, probably good to start here. So March the 26th, 1968. This is what's that, 5 years, just shy of 5 years after Kennedy's assassination. The Sydney Morning Herald, and for those that are tuning in from abroad, that is one of the leading newspapers in Sydney, Australia. Correspondence, so a letter that the Sydney Morning Herald sent to then Director of the CIA, Richard Helms, requesting, this letter is to request the declassification of Warren Commission document 971, which apparently consists of a memo written by you, being Richard Helms, and is now sealed in the National Archives. The description of reference number CD 971 is as follows. Anonymous telephone calls to US Embassy in Canberra, Australia, relative to planned assassination of President Kennedy. I'd never heard of this before, so I found this very, very interesting. And so that was basically the letter that was sent by the editor and manager, Peter Micklemore, in 1968. So what is this reference to anonymous telephone calls to the US Embassy in Canberra, Australia? Well, it turns out that this anonymous call, there is a transcript of this anonymous call. And so if I come to, this is a non-CIA teletyped message, and there are a few things in bold that are interesting. Obviously, this is reference to CIA. There's Canberra referenced, our capital in Australia, and pass also to CIA, possible Soviet informer. This is the 24th of November, 1963. Now that is, I imagine that's Australia. I'm not sure if that's, that's the date of this teletype anyway. So this is what the teletype says. Received telephone call on the 23rd of November, the day that JFK was assassinated, from person claiming to be a Polish driver of a Russian vehicle. The info touched on several areas, including possible connection Soviet government supplying money to an individual in the US to assassinate the president. And we know, obviously, of Lee Harvey Oswald's connection to the Soviet Union. Possible Soviet implication in USS Thresher incident, some other information pertaining to Cuba. And let me just come on down to some other elements that are of interest. On the 15th of October, 1962, so this is more than a year before Kennedy was assassinated, a similar call was received at the embassy, possibly from the same person. In that call, reference was made to a plot with a reward for $100,000 to kill the president. And the assessment went on in item 6. While some aspects indicate individual as a crank, others seem more authentic. All parties, including the ambassador, feel the matter should be investigated until the facts are developed or existing leads have been exhausted. So interesting that a little over a year before the assassination, there is a telephone call made. It comes into Canberra, Australian Embassy, and then the day of the assassination, another call that they believe was from the same person. Now, where did those lines of inquiry go? I really, really don't know. But what is interesting is if we come back, let me show you now another document. So let me kind of summarize what we've covered so far. So Australia is referenced in the March 2025 release of the JFK files, primarily due to the involvement of the Australian Security Intelligence Organization, ASIO, in the investigation following President Kennedy's assassination. This connection is detailed in a specific document which reveals ASIO's coordination with the CIA over a Warren Commission document, the one that we're talking about, and highlights Australia's role as a liaison partner in intelligence sharing during the Cold War era. So following, obviously, this request from the Sydney Morning Herald, asking for a copy of this specific document regarding this anonymous call to the U.S. Embassy, I should say, in Canberra, relative to the planned assassination. There was then let me go to now our next document. So this is now correspondence from ASIO, and let me pull this one up for you. This is a letter from. It's a little bit hard to see, so let me try and zoom in a little bit for you. So Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, October 15th, 1968. And this is from a gentleman, CCF Spry, who is the head of ASIO. And so he wrote this letter to then CIA Director Richard Helms, basically objecting to the release of this document, CD 971, which the Sydney Morning Herald had requested. So it says, your Melbourne station has sought my views on the possibility. When he says your Melbourne station, that's going to become important later on. So we'll talk about that. Your Melbourne station, again, this is a letter that is being addressed to Richard Helms. So dear Dick, your Melbourne station has sought my views on the possibility of declassifying a Warren Commission document in which reference is made to the Australian Security Service. The document question CD 971 dated 22nd of May, 1964, together with an attachment dated 29th November, 1963. Now, so the teletype transcript I read is not this CD 971. That just kind of gives you a sense as to the anonymous call. I would recommend strongly that CD 971 and its attachment should not on any account be declassified or publicly released for reasons which include the following. It has never been officially stated that there is a CIA Canberra station or that there are CIA offices in Australia. This has been avoided as a point of policy. This is back in the 60s. Publication of these facts would invoke a pate of questions by the press and in the Parliament, which would be contrary to the national security interests, for example, who approved the establishment of the CIA Canberra station. It's a good question. What is its composition location? What is its purpose in Australia? Allegations have already been made that CIA is interfering in Australia domestic affairs. With what Australian agencies does it, being CIA deal? ASIS, which is the Australian, I can't remember the name, Australian Secret Intelligence Service, I believe, which has not been disclosed publicly at the time of this document, could be brought into discussion. With that, other foreign agencies, with what other foreign agency does the ASIO deal? What ministerial control is there over such dealings? And questions should be raised as to the investigation by the ASIO of the anonymous telephone call, the validity of its quoted conclusion, and the result of its further inquiries. I'm going to give you a copy of this letter to your Melbourne station. Canberra and Melbourne, right. So that suggests a CIA presence in Melbourne and Australia's capital, Canberra. So the response, that was from, again, this was from the head of ASIO to the CIA director. The response that came back from CIA director Richard Helms, and this is the document. Again, let me zoom on in. This is 26th of November 1968. Sir Charles C.F. Spry, Director General of the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation. Dear Charles, thank you for your letter of 15 October recommending against the declassification of Warren Commission document CD971. I might mention that our inquiry to you in August was in anticipation of further pressure for the release of Warren Commission papers, a pressure which has not materialized. Accordingly, there is not at present time any intention to release CD971. Should the question be raised at some future time, the points made by you in your letter provide every reason to keep the document out of public domain. So clearly some coordination between the CIA and ASIO as to keeping specific documents out of public eye, because it would raise questions as to CIA involvement in Australian affairs and in our sovereign territory. So now, what is interesting is there's confirmation in other documents, and I don't know if these have come directly from the JFK files. This might have been from other documents. And again, thank you to some good researchers that shared this document with me. So FE Division stands for Far East Division. So Field Far East Division of the CIA. And obviously you see Melbourne is listed. So there is a Melbourne CIA office operating in the 60s. There is another document that also, again, above and beyond just the letters that you've seen, that shows some of the field offices globally. And in the Far East Division, you've got MELB, Melbourne, and CNBR, Canberra. So, clearly the CIA has a presence in Australia in the 1960s. Now, why is this all very interesting? Because, so again, this is just reading some information that I was able to open source. So CIA and ASIO work together to sanitize related documents, including Helms' response to Spry, which I just read, and cables between CIA headquarters and Canberra to safeguard their intelligence sharing partnership. These documents were classified as assassination records, but their full release was postponed until 2017. And obviously now it's coming out 2025. This effort underscores Australia's role as a trusted ally in the intelligence community during the JFK assassination investigation, with both agencies prioritizing secrecy over transparency at the time. The March 2025 release also reflects the CIA's broader consultations with foreign liaison services, including ASIO, to manage the disclosure of sensitive foreign government information in the JFK collection. Australia's inclusion in this process highlights its participation in the international dimensions of the investigation, particularly given the Cold War context and concerns about potential Soviet involvement. Why does it all matter? So Australia's reference in the file stems from a seemingly minor incident, again, this anonymous call that we talked about, which nonetheless triggered significant attention from ASIO and the CIA. This sensitivity likely arose from the Cold War climate, where any hint of Soviet activity, even in a distant location like Australia, was scrutinized as a potential lead in the JFK assassination probe. While this detail does not directly challenge the Warren Commission's conclusions that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, it illustrates the global scope of the investigation and the lengths to which intelligence agencies went to protect their operations and relationships. In summary, Australia is referenced in the March 2025 JFK files because of ASIO's efforts to shield its intelligence collaboration with the CIA and its objection to the release of a Warren Commission document mentioning Australian security services. This reflects both Australia's specific role in the investigation and the broader international effort to address the assassination amidst Cold War tensions. So very, very interesting. And the officers in question, so the CIA officers were operating in Australia during the 1960s, primarily due to Australia's strategic importance as a key ally in the Asia-Pacific region during the Cold War. This period was characterized by intense US-Soviet rivalry and the spread of communism in Southeast Asia, making Australia's geographic proximity to conflict zones like Vietnam and Indonesia, as well as its role in intelligence sharing agreements, critical for American intelligence operations. The CIA's FE, Far East divisions in Melbourne and Canberra, were likely set up to oversee intelligence operations across the Asia-Pacific, leveraging Australia's location to gather information on communist movements in the region, including in Vietnam and Indonesia, where, again, major anti-communist actions occurred in 1965 and 1966. 1966 is an interesting year. The Far East Division served as operational hubs for the CIA, including enabling coordination with ASIO, management of agent networks, and support for covert operations throughout the region. Their presence in Melbourne and Canberra suggests a division of responsibilities. Canberra, as the political capital, was ideal for liaison with government and intelligence agencies, while Melbourne, a major economic centre at the time, may have supported logistical or operational needs. In summary, the CIA's Far East divisions in Melbourne and Canberra during the 1960s were established to capitalise on Australia's strategic location, its role as a Five Eyes partner, and its alliance with the US in combating communism during the Cold War. These divisions enhanced intelligence collection, supported regional operations, interesting, and strengthened US-Australian intelligence cooperation, making them a crucial component of Australia's Cold War strategy in the Asia-Pacific. So I know that's a mouthful, folks, but again, very, very interesting, of ASIO's coordination and involvement with the CIA to kind of keep key documents secret that would expose, sensitive security intelligence operations within Australia. Now, what do I find interesting about the CIA having a base in Melbourne, Australia, and the fact that they had an office in Melbourne, Australia in the 60s, specifically 1966? What do we know happened on the 6th of April, 1966? The Westall flying saucer incident. So put on your kind of speculation hat for just a second. Imagine if it was true that the CIA was responsible, operating or aware of some clandestine crash retrieval program, and Westall was whatever it was that was observed above the sky of Westall High School on the 6th of April, 1966 was truly anomalous and came down and crashed and was retrieved, was recovered. It doesn't, you don't have to stretch the imagination that far to then suspect, well, did the CIA have any involvement in any retrieval effort? So I've submitted a FOIA request to the CIA for records that they had created or that were shared with them in April 1966 for the full month, not specifying any search words like Westall or Clayton South or flying saucer or UFO or anything like that. I imagine it would have been a relatively small operation, Melbourne office. Again, that's just a guess on my end. It may yield no fruit. It may yield some fruit. But again, if it comes up as a potential lead, maybe a weak lead, it's still worth pursuing as a lead nonetheless on the Westall incident. So I just found that to be quite interesting because I was not aware whatsoever of Australia's specific reference at all in any of the JFK files. So let's have a look at some of the comments that you've sent through, folks, because I know I've been talking away there for quite the while. So let's have a look. Yes, Zane, hang on, Grant does a read of highlighted comments from live chat. Best behavior all. Yes. Keep it clean. Don't be mean, folks. So let's have a look at any comments pertaining to the JFK files. Let's have a quick look here. Oh, Ryan Sprague, my friend. Great to see you. Congrats to the chat. This is so interesting. Thank you as always, my friend, for tuning in. I know the time zone is not as friendly, but great to see you here. And those that don't follow Somewhere in the Skies, do jump over to Ryan's YouTube channel. He put some great content out, as well as Somewhere in the Ring. If you're a wrestling fan, do check out his other channel where he has a co-host and they talk all things WWE. Thank you, Henry Lee. Looking forward to seeing what FOI documents you come up with. And it is interesting, Jasmine, I always wonder how the Americans got to Westall so quickly, because a lot of the primary witnesses stated that they distinctly recall, some of the children even distinctly recall adults with American accents, on site. Henry Lee, based on Greer's Lost Century doco, the Westall event was a reversed engineered craft, hence why the Army were able to get there so quickly. So many unanswered questions regarding Westall. It would be wonderful if there is some form of formal explanation or documentation that was provided from government. I mean, we know that the Department of Supply apparently investigated the Westall incident, put together a comprehensive report, and that report sadly has never seen the light of day. So very frustrating. So let's move away from the JFK files. Again, not spending too much time there, because I do want to jump on over to some other stories closer to home, looking at UAP, UFO-related news from down under as well as across the pond. So over the weekend, I had the good fortune of attending the Avalon International Airshow at Avalon. This is the second time that I've ever been to an air show, and so much fun. It's not just for us big kids that like the cool military assets and planes. It's also a lot of fun for the kids, and I took my 2 kids along, and they probably didn't enjoy it as much as I did, but it was a hell of a lot of fun. So I put together a brief little video recap, so you can get a sense as to what took place. I went on Friday the 28th. It goes for a whole week with 3 days for the general public, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So if you've never been, I would certainly encourage you to think about going. It's every 2 years at Avalon. And just a lot of fun. And if you're interested in aviation, whether it be civil, general aviation, or military, it's a truly fascinating event. So here's a brief video recap from my attendance with my family on the Friday. So there you go, folks. Just a quick recap from my day out there. A lot of fun. The F-35 was kind of like the cream of the crop on the day. I found actually 2023 to be a little bit more spectacular because the F-22 was on display from the US. No F-22 Raptors this year. It was the Royal Australian Air Force's F-35 to a Lightning. So, and there was F-18 Super Hornets obviously on display as well. They put on an absolutely incredible show. Had to buy little ear mufflers for my kids because, man, the noise when they get some speed behind them, the noise is absolutely deafening. Now, unfortunately, the event wasn't. It was tragic in the respect that there was a major accident. And thankfully, it happened just as I was leaving with my family. So I really felt for a lot of the families that had their children there because there's so many families there. There was a really tragic accident. Many of you may have seen this on television. One of the aerial stunt performers came out of a loop too late. It was too shallow, and he actually crashed his plane. Thankfully, he didn't die, but he was in critical condition and was transported by medevac helicopter to a major hospital. So, I mean, viewer discretion to advise. This is what was captured by one of the attendees that was right on the front line when it all went down. So, again, viewer discretion advised. If you are watching this with children, maybe consider turning away. But this is what happened, unfortunately.
The wings, a lot of Steve Wolf componentry in that orange S11X. Have a look at that. Absolutely snap roll through. Keep looking. Brains absolutely everywhere at the moment.
Yeah, truly tragic. And they suspended all of the displays after that took place, but then the air show continued on the Saturday and the Sunday. So tragic that happened, and unfortunately we've seen that sadly too often at air shows internationally. Never would I thought that it would happen in Australia. Unfortunately, it did, and it was in the news pretty quickly. Glenn Collins, who was only 50 years of age, was critical after his plane crashed during the air show, and some pretty, I mean, only 4 years older than I am, and some pretty obviously a very experienced stunt pilot, and some pretty graphic pictures as to the plane when it crashed. So I've linked that article in the show notes. If you want to read that article, you can. Again, don't know the current condition of that individual other than at the time of the reporting, it was critical condition, but stable. So a bit of a dampener on the whole thing. But again, if you've never been to an air show, I would thoroughly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. It's a great day out with your family and friends. And if you're an aviation buff, there's a lot of cool things to look at. And we're only there for half a day. So you might even be with the Red Bull team who do a lot of the incredible stunts. So yeah, Dr. Dan was a hell of a lot of fun. And if like I said, if you've never been before, it's certainly worth going out there. So let's transition now to another story. This one not so close to home. This is, as much as I don't want to talk about this, it's probably something that's worth talking about. So Dr. Stephen Greer, again, making waves in the airwaves. He recently has started his own podcast, the Dr. Stephen Greer Podcast. And thank you to Gimme for pointing me to this specifically in episode 7 that he did a week or two ago. Stephen Greer said this on his podcast.
It has the office of the presidency. It's the office of the presidency we deal with. Whoever is the Minister of Defense of Canada could be a socialist, could be a conservative. Same thing in Australia when I briefed that gentleman. I didn't care what political party he was part of. He was in that position for one of the Five Eyes spy cooperative, as it were, intelligence cooperative countries with the U.S. The Five Eyes are U.S., Canada, Great Britain, Australia, and New Zealand. I provided briefings to every Ministry of Defense for all of them except New Zealand. Now, I didn't say, well, what party are you a part of this day? Whatever. We can't get tied into that because the issue is so profound. It's a universal, not just a global issue. We're not alone in the cosmos. They're here. There has to be a response from not just the United States or one president or party, but from the entirety of humanity.
So Dr. Stephen Greer sticking to his guns there. And once again, this is, I don't know how many times he's done this, almost probably half a dozen times now in the last couple of years, that he briefed an Australian government official. And we know from previous statements that it was the then Australian Minister for Defence, Stephen Smith. And I've covered that claim extensively in 2 episodes, which last month was part 2 of did Dr. Stephen Greer brief an Australian Minister of Defence. At this point in time, there is no evidence to support Dr. Stephen Greer's claim. So I've reached out to Dr. Stephen Greer's camp a number of times requesting for some supporting evidence, and none has been provided to date. So I still remain very skeptical of Dr. Stephen Greer's claims that he briefed a former Australian Minister for Defence. Again, sticking with thanking Gimme. Gimme was also kind enough to alert me to the fact that the disclosure project briefing document that Dr. Stephen Greer put out, and I believe you can purchase a soft copy. It's about half a gig. It's pretty massive. And I have not, nor am I interested, going through the entire document. But what I did find interesting in the document is if we pull up, I'll pull up the, here we go. So if I jump to, let's jump to a specific page. I'm going to jump to page 156. And where do we get to? So this is in Dr. Stephen Greer's the disclosure project briefing document for 2025 that he allegedly provided to the Trump administration. You have an entire section, Pine Gap and faked alien abductions. And when I first read this, I just called BS on the whole thing. I don't put any stock into this claim whatsoever. I'll read it for you to see how, so you can come up with your own conclusion, but how, in my opinion, ridiculous it is. Pine Gap in Australia is understood to be a prime location for these covert UFO UAP operations. That's been long rumored. This underground facility, it's never been proven that Pine Gap has an underground facility, and Ross's intelligence contacts have told him that Pine Gap is not an underground facility, is similar to one located in the, I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, Chihuahua Desert. Someone can probably correct me on that. A physicist, get out of the way, with whom Dr. Greer had met in Seattle years ago, shared his experience. He was accompanied by security personnel for protection. He had been on helicopters that entered the Pine Gap facility, which, like the one in the Chihuahua Desert, is concealed by a hologram designed to resemble a mountainside. Upon landing on an elevator platform, the desert leads deep underground. Now, we do know that there is, I've covered on this channel, Mount Zeal, the remote viewing work of Joe McMoneagle, is it? He said, there's an alien base under Mount Zeal, which is about 2 hours northwest of Pine Gap. Now, it's never been proven that there is an underground base there, but could this potentially be part of where this story has come all about? Upon landing on an elevator platform, the descent leads deep underground, like I mentioned. During his time there, the physicists observed the creation of these entities, describing them as emerging from a conveyor belt, much like sausages. These fake aliens are produced with advanced UFO, UAP, electronic warfare systems capable of affecting consciousness and tools to render people unconscious or stunned. They also employ canisters of drugs to incapacitate those in the area. To most observers, these aliens are highly convincing, but they are not real ETs. They are man-made, consisting of android, robotic, and some biological system, far more sophisticated than rudimentary versions used decades ago. In the late 1950s and 1960s, earlier models. I can't even read the rest of this. Unfortunately, I'm going to stop there because it just is sounds like a work of fiction for me. And the fact that you've got Richard Doty referenced in the next couple of paragraphs, yeah, that is enough for me to read, I'm afraid. But if you are interested to have a look at it, do check out the the Disclosure Project briefing document for 2025. Give it a look-see if you're interested. All right, let's move away from, actually, let's see, a few of you have, yes, fair point, Aaron. I would love to see an Australian filmmaker make a movie about Westall as well. Great Australian filmmaker, Greg McLean, does some really good, he's done some great horror films in Australia. Obviously, he did Rogue, about the giant croc in the Northern Territory. He also did Wolf Creek. He's behind that whole franchise. So, he's more of a horror film director, but I think he does some great films. So, who knows? Yes, and to echo your sentiment there, Aaron, Dr. Stephen Greer sometimes says some BS claims. I mean, I don't discredit him. I believe he truly did some great work to push the envelope and advance the conversation with the 2001 National Press Club event. But I don't know, a lot of the stuff that he's done since then, I think, has been out of a desire to stay relevant, I'm afraid, with more and more. No one owns the conversation on the UAP topic, and I personally think he's tried to do that for many, many years and is trying to hold on tightly to what, what perceived fame he has as a subject matter expert on the whole topic. Excuse me. Dr. Dan says, Greer has lost all credibility for me. Now, no, then this was ridiculous. And him recently saying his CE5, the Phoenix Lights, further questions his honesty and credibility. That's just absurd. Ozgoober joining from X. Welcome. Conveyor belt like to make 100s. Where are they? If you put any stock in that claim, I don't know where to even begin. Zane, you have a comment from Twitter. What could we possibly have to do with JFK back then? Thank you for sharing that, Zane. Yeah, so we kind of covered that in the last probably half hour. So if you missed that, Christopher F., do feel free to go back and watch over. Dr. Stephen Greer is all about the dollars. I kind of agree with you in many respects there, Aaron. And Ozgoober, they all have extra information that must not tell us yet. Not too sure about the context there. Rebecca's comment, in the 1990s, he was a primary contactee, but not today. And he still tries to hold on to that, unfortunately. I think there's a lot of truth to that commentary there. So let's move away. Let's hopefully leave behind us Dr. Stephen Greer. And let's probably people don't want to really talk about this either, what we're about to cover, but 60 Minutes recently did a story on the whole drone incursions, primarily in New Jersey in the United States, but in other parts of the world, in the UK. And I think it was good that 60 Minutes did it because it called attention to the complete, domain awareness gap and capability gap that the US Department of Defense currently has when it comes to drones. So let me play for you briefly this clip. I am going to put my banner on so I don't hopefully get a copyright claim or a strike here. So let's play this short clip from 60 Minutes' recent airing of their story on the drone incursions. I mean, it's so the waters are so incredibly muddied on the whole drone issue. You've got White House press secretary coming out saying, "Oh, they're all FAA authorized drones." You've got this this comment from this gentleman in one of the intelligence committees saying DOD is still mystified. How can you not? And you had the FBI testifying before Congress. When was it? In late November, I believe. They had no idea what these drones were. So there's just what a complete clusterfuck, to be honest. That they couldn't organize a piss up in a brewer if they tried. No one knows what's going on. There's a lack of information sharing. How can you not, in 2025, with the mightiest military power on the planet that receives the most amount of funding of any military presence on the planet, can't get its shit together and organize and get on top of a drone issue, detection, identification, tracking, mitigation, resolution, bring it down or whatever. There's the fact that they've still got problems with drones is just so incredibly concerning. And this is exactly, Ryan Graves is saying, these are the same issues that we wanted to bring to the forefront with respect to UAP. There was, issues with, obviously there was detection, but there was no effort to track and investigate UAP. And they've got the same problem with drones where no one knows what the hell's going on. And there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of interest to be that transparent with the American public. And so what I found interesting in that particular clip when I was watching 60 Minutes was the reference to the drone incursions in the UK, because I had previously submitted FOIA requests to the Australian Defense Department, the Australian Defense Attaché in Washington, D.C., and also the equivalent Defense Attaché at the High Commission in the United Kingdom, the equivalent of the Australian Embassy in the UK. And so this is just to kind of refresh your memory from, this is dating back, when did I submit this request? This was in December. Interesting enough, when that individual in that clip was interviewed. So in December, I requested copies of briefing documents and all communications produced by the Air and Space Attaché at the Australian Embassy in Washington, D.C., and the Office of the Air Force Advisor at the High Commission of Australia in London that pertain to incursions by unmanned aerial systems, UAS, otherwise referred to as drones, at RAAF Mildenhall, RAAF Lakenheath, RAAF Feltwell, and the date range was the 20th of November to the 6th of December. That's when a lot of the activity was going on. And came back, they said they identified 3 documents as falling within the scope of the request, but they actually had, they were all exempt from release due to national security issues. FOIA exemption 33A, documents affecting national security, defense, or international relations. Document is exempt, is an exempt document if disclosure of the document would or could reasonably be expected to cause damage to the defence of the Commonwealth, Australia, the international relations of Australia. So they knocked me back completely on release of those documents, which I found interesting. What could be included in those documents that is so sensitive? If it's only, as the FAA had kind of alluded to in the US, if it's only hobbyist drones and authorized drones doing research activity, well, how is any of that information, a national security consideration? So, but we don't know what was being encountered over these bases in the UK. They could have been hobbyists, they could have been research based drones, they could have been foreign adversarial. So I submitted a follow-up FOIA request. I wanted the Australian Department of Defense to show their work. I wanted the FOIA office to be able to show me, all right, I want to see all of the communications that relate to and support the determination that you just made, that those 3 documents were all exempt from release due to national security considerations. And they identified 4 documents as falling within the scope of the request, and they partially released those documents. So let me show you this document. This is obviously a first, an exclusive. Haven't shared this document publicly before. Nothing too exciting in it, so don't get too excited. But let me show you. Where is it? Number 9. There we go. So this basically shows, and I'll just go to. Let's start here. 20th of January of this year. So this is, me asking the FOIA team to show me how that conclusion was reached, that the documents can't be released because of national security. So good morning, PFA. Oh, I can't remember what the bloody PFA acronym. Please find attached the original documents located within scope of the request. I'm going to put the goggles on here if I want to read it off the screen. At first glance, these documents will likely be redacted in full or contain extensive redactions under S33B, documents affecting national security, defense, or international relations as it relates to matter communicated in confidence by or on behalf of a foreign government. That was on the 20th of January. S22 is just irrelevant to the request, so that's nothing to worry about, those significant redactions. What was that? That was 20th, so a week later. Good morning. Please find attached the draft statement of reasons prepared for a refusal decision under 33B, as the ADM agrees the documents should be exempt. Same day. Hi, someone. I'm comfortable to support a full refusal, but this would need to be under sections 33A3 and 33A2, international relations and defense of the Commonwealth. Section 33B does apply, but only in part, as it only covers communications revealed in confidence from a foreign government, not between Australia and another government. So is there a potential follow-up FOIA request there to try and get some partial release of comms? I'm not too sure. For your situational awareness, please see below Director of FOI's response recommending we change the redaction codes. I'm happy to proceed with their recommendations and update the statement of reason if you have no concerns. And then it was pretty much, I'm happy to go with the recommendation. Please find attached the updated statement of reasons. So happy with the statement of reasons presented. So please find, where was it? This is the one that's interesting though. So please find attached the original documents located within the scope of the request. It would be very, very interesting to see what is in those documents, because they're saying they're released in their entirety due to documents affecting national security, defense, or international relations. Now, again, if it was just hobbyist drones or research drones that were authorized to operate for research purposes, you think that would not necessarily, documents pertaining to that would not affect national security, defense, and international relations. So could that be a tell that what was observed over these bases in the UK was foreign adversarial UAS, unmanned aerial systems, or could it have been something more exotic like UAP? But again, we don't really have any reports of any truly anomalous characteristics being exhibited, other than the fact that there was no, what was it? I don't know if any of the 5 observables were actually documented regarding any of those, other than the fact that they didn't know where they were coming from. They didn't know where they were departing. They weren't easily trackable, and they couldn't be, they weren't, their efforts to deploy systems to try and disable them or were unsuccessful. So it's still a huge mystery as to what the hell was going on with these drone incursions over the UK. Not just the UK. You also have them obviously in other parts of the world. I mean, you've got Ross say that there was on the east coast of Australia drone incursions over a military installation, and we'll come to that clip in just a moment. And obviously the huge number of drone incursions and sightings of drones in the United States on the eastern seaboard in New Jersey. So yeah, just still very puzzling to this day. And again, the complete communication and mismessaging from the White House, the FAA, Congress is completely, I think at their end of their tether because they're not able to get a straight answer on what the hell's going on. So, and kudos to folks like Christopher Sharp and Ross Coulthart and others that have done a lot of work to try and get more information out there on these drone incursions. So, still a very puzzling one and confusing one at that. And this was from now kind of leading away from the 60 Minutes. So Bryce and Ross on the latest Need to Know, they talk about the drone incursions specifically. So let me play this clip for you. Again, not that hopefully I would need it, but I'll play this clip for you nonetheless.
For a couple of reasons about the drone situation. And again, I'm just kind of restating your narrative there. But first of all, what we're seeing is not transparency at all, and that was promised. This is instead subterfuge. And to me, it's highly offensive. Second, as you pointed out, the performance of the media has been actually abysmal. I mean, it's just awful. I've read multiple stories. Every morning I start with kind of a survey of what's in the news. And when, there's drone coverage, I focus on it and read it. And I have read multiple articles, not just one or two, multiple articles where the reporter simply asserts as if it is a proven fact that it's all been explained as FAA test drones. Boom, move on, nothing to see here. And I find that so discouraging. I mean, it's government obfuscation married to media malfeasance, which I think means bullshit. Doesn't make me happy.
I completely agree with you. No, I mean, something's wrong with the official drones explanation. I mean, I'm getting inquiries from people from all over the world still who are saying to me, are you still interested in these objects? Because we're still seeing them. I'm talking to a guy off a major city on the east coast of Australia at the moment who's telling me that he's seeing fleets of these things just off the coast. And what's more, they're disrupting a military area on the coast. So whatever this is, it hasn't gone away.
Well, not only has it not gone away, but Ross, the thing that is making both of us want to tear our hair out, what little is left for both of us, is that why is the FAA supposed to be flying drones into Australia? I mean, that would be something that would be so highly irregular, so just ridiculous times 10. And yet we're to believe that. And the FAA, these FAA drones were flying into the UK. And frankly, these drones have been seen all over the world at this point. So it just doesn't, pardon the expression, but it just doesn't fly.
So a bit of a leap there, I think, from Bryce making the assumption that what was observed over the bases in the UK and what Ross had received reports of on the eastern coast of Australia, a bit of a leap there, assumption that they were all FAA authorized drones. We don't know that. I mean, unfortunately, I think what happened with a lot of reports of New Jersey is you get a lot of copycat stuff. Reports of drones, then hobbyist drones want to put their drone up to see if they can see what's going on. So I think you get copycats of copycats of copycats. But interesting comments from Ross there that he's received reports of swarms of drones that are impacting military installation off the east coast of Australia. I would love to know a little bit more about those reports. And there really hasn't been anything reported in the Australian press of drone activity in Australia. So just some interesting comments there from Bryce and Ross. And I think, Bryce, I think articulated well the frustration a lot of folks have and what I was trying to get across before showing that clip. I think Bryce articulated it quite nicely. Also in that episode of Need to Know, this is just off the topic of drones, Bryce and Ross, they were talking about, well, what would you expect from the US if they had a plan for disclosure? Would there be an expectation that they would share information with the Five Eyes? So it's just an interesting comment, some interesting comments from Bryce. So let me play this clip for you for complete context.
That we've been getting a plan together since, say, 2017, when the New York Times wrote its article and Elizondo came out, and now we've had Grusch and Barber and the gang. I would think it would be incumbent upon anybody who was sitting on top of really important information to say, what's our plan here, folks? So obviously, it would benefit any country to be first, I think. I'm not positive, but I think it would benefit them to at least say, if they thought it was inevitable. If you think it's inevitable, then it's good to get out front of it. That's what we teach in PR classes across journalism schools all over the world. So yeah, it'd probably be good to get out in front of it. But then what I really hope we have a plan for is, if the scenario you paint about China or Russia sort of coming forward, I hope we have a plan that we can implement immediately, where we jump in and sort of confuse the issue about who actually started this. Just have our own plan to get something out there, because it would be good for our country to do it. And I'm talking as an American now. I think Australia would obviously be part of that plan. I mean, obviously, the Five Eyes have been have every good reason to have a plan coordinated, and I haven't seen anything Trump said that he's getting out of the Five Eyes agreements or anything like that. So let's just say we're all on the same team. I hope they can do it.
Well, I hope you're right there, Bryce, because I certainly remember the Australian Department of Defence couldn't even initially confirm if Australia attended AARO's inaugural Five Eyes UAP Caucus Working Group meeting in May 2023, and then less than 6 months later, they're coming out saying, oh, no, yeah, we did have a defense representative based in Washington, D.C. attend. So you would want to hope that Australia is going to be involved in any conversations regarding a disclosure plan. I think there is a crazy amount of there's a crazy lack of information sharing across the Australian Department of Defence. I suspect that the Chief of Air Force has absolutely no idea what discussions have been going on between AARO and others in the Australian Department of Defence, possibly the Defence Intelligence Organisation, who I suspect were actually represented at AARO's Five Eyes meeting in May 2023, and that information from that meeting was not then shared with, did not trickle down to the Chief of Air Force until about almost shy of a year later. So Chief of Air Force was asking for an immediate summary or key talking points in, I think, February of 2024, about what happened at AARO's Five Eyes meeting, which happened in May 2023. So you think the Chief of Air Force would be the one person in the Australian Department of Defence that has a need to know, because it's that individual that's fronting up before Senate estimates and has to answer questions that are thrown his way by senators like Australian Senator Peter Whish-Wilson, who has continued to ask questions on this topic. So just some interesting comments there from Bryce. I certainly hope that the Five Eyes would be included in any plans for any formal disclosure, but I'm not all that confident based on the current track record of the Australian Department of Defence. So there's another good podcast that was played not so long ago, recently, and think of these gents what you will, but I do appreciate the information they put out. Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp on the latest episode of Weaponized. George was talking about the 60 Minutes piece and his frustration with the drone issue, and that the information that he and Jeremy claimed to be aware of was not being taken seriously, and that maybe 60 Minutes were not being completely genuine, or they're being disingenuous in how they're presenting information pertaining to the 2019 events off the off the West Coast. So let me play this clip for you, so you've got a sense as to what I'm referring to. And note at the back end, there's an interesting comment from George, which I think we as Aussies will find interesting and entertaining.
to help with that kind of stuff, to provide access to them and other media outlets to get to the bottom of what happened in that 2019 series of events, and they don't really seem to want it. I'll tell you what really bugged me is they had a one-sentence piece in the 60 Minutes story about this unnamed Chinese freighter ship that was out there. For years, I think they said, the Navy has suspected that ship, that Chinese ship, was launching drones. Well, we know for a fact that is not true. I mean, yeah, maybe somebody suspected at some point. The ship, by the way, is called the Bass Strait. There was a ship out there. It's registered in Hong Kong. And it's interesting. I think old UFO people like me have heard the term Bass Strait before, because it's a strait between Tasmania and mainland Australia. And back in, I think, 1978, there was a famous UFO incident. A 20-year-old pilot named Frederich Valentich was flying. He calls into the Melbourne air traffic control tower and said, "Hey, there's something really weird flying above me. It's like 1,000 feet above me. I think it's a plane." And he says, "Oh, my engine is starting to go bad." And then he says, his last transmission says, "It's not a plane." And then poof, he's gone. He disappeared. It's a mystery that's never been solved, but it happened over the Bass Strait. So for a ship named Bass Strait to become the focal point of a new UFO mystery is really kind of ironic, I think. But we know for a fact that ship did not launch those drones, or any drones, because when it got into port, our friend Jay Stratton, who told us in one of our very first weaponized episodes, told us about this. He had the UAP task force. He had contacts with the Department of Justice. He sent agents there. They were waiting for it when it got into Long Beach, I think. And they got on board that ship, looked around. There's no drone mechanisms. There's no drone launching capabilities. And I think, as you told me, while the ship is there, landlocked, the drone activity, the mystery UAS, whatever you want to call them, continued for the U.S. Navy. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So that's interesting. I wasn't aware of that Jay Stratton was involved in an investigation of the search or whatever it might be of the Bass Strait ship, and that drones were still reported whilst there was no drone activity. Whilst there was on-site investigation. So you can hear the contention there that George has with respect to how 60 Minutes reported on that. So I think both Jeremy and George have done a lot of work over the years reporting on the 2019 incidents. So understandably, they're a little miffed if they feel like their reporting wasn't considered when 60 Minutes put out what they did. But yes, very interesting and ironic connection there. The Bass Strait, obviously connection to the Frederich Valentich case, tragic case, which we've covered on this channel previously, where 20-year-old Frederich Valentich, lost his life. His plane, his small single prop engine plane, was never recovered. And an incredibly chilling transmission that was released only last year, the actual original audio recording between Frederich Valentich and Melbourne Air Traffic Control. And this is linked in the description below. If you haven't heard this before and you're interested to, you can listen to it in its entirety, but I'll play it for you now so that you can have a frame of reference for what George was referring to with the last transmission from Frederich Valentich. Whoops, wrong one. Let me play the right one for you. There we go. And we'll come back to that one in just a moment. So this is the last couple of minutes of the transmission between Frederich Valentich and Melbourne Air Traffic Control in October of 1978. Is that right? Yeah, I think so.
It's Melbourne. It seems like it's chasing me. What I'm doing right now is orbiting, and the thing is just orbiting on top of me also. It's got a green light and sort of metallic light. Torch on in the outside. You haven't got anything on radar at all, is it? Nothing that I can say was an aircraft, no. Delta Sierra Juliet. Weather returns down there at about that position. Or a bit further north of me. Yeah. It's just vanished. Yeah. Delta Sierra Juliet. Would you know what kind of aircraft I've got? Is it a military aircraft? And Delta Sierra Juliet, confirm the aircraft just vanished. Right. Say again? And Delta Sierra Juliet, is the aircraft still with you? Delta Sierra Juliet on north, south, fighting from the southwest. Delta Sierra Juliet. Delta Sierra Juliet, the engine is front idling, so it's at 23, 24, and the thing is stopping. Delta Sierra Juliet, Roger, what are your intentions? My intentions are to go to King Island, Melbourne. That strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. It is hovering, and it's not an aircraft. Delta Sierra Juliet. Delta Sierra Juliet, Melbourne.
So, fascinating exchange, and interesting that, when he first picked up that his engine was starting to idle and was coughing, it was only a second or two later that he then talked about it's hovering again. So he didn't sound overly concerned. He stayed relatively calm throughout it all. But what is interesting is that, thanks to Zane, who shared a video that he was able to track down of a similar incident with respect to the noise that was coming. Now, it's hard to kind of hear entirely from that 1978 recording because of all the static and background noise, but this was an interesting video that Zane shared with me regarding a catastrophic engine failure that had a very similar sound to what you heard in that Valentich recording. So let me play this for you just by way of comparison, and you can reach your own conclusion. That was a rough one, rough landing. So, obviously it sounds that very clattering sort of clacking sound is interesting, frame of reference in terms of potential comparison. But what was it that Frederich Valentich saw or encountered? Was that the cause of the engine troubles that he had, or did the engine troubles just happen to occur independent of what he was observing? Was there connection? Who knows? It still remains a truly unresolved, mysterious, unresolved cold case to this day. And unfortunately, Frederich Valentich's body was never recovered. There have been claims that portions of his aircraft were recovered over the years, but there was no definitive positive identification. So it's just a tragic event, and obviously ironic connection there that George was referencing with the Bass Strait. So let's turn away from weaponized and the Valentich case, and because there was another good podcast that I saw only recently, which some of you might find interesting. So Alex Dietrich, who was one of the observers of the Nimitz, the 2004 Nimitz or Tic Tac case, excuse me, she was recently on a podcast being interviewed by I think it was the Americans Veterans Center, and she had some very interesting commentary, above and beyond pertaining to the Tic Tac incident, but why she advocates for the topic to be taken seriously and for there to be, reporting mechanisms in place so that if people encounter something that they can't readily reconcile or identify, they should be able to report that without fear of ridicule or stigma. So let me play this clip for you. Here we go. Where is it? Oh, wrong one. There we go.
This was and continues to be a crack in our dominance, really, in every other area, because it doesn't fit neatly in any of the conventional bins. And I suspect that that's why in the moment the chain of command said, that was weird. We don't know what it was. We've got a job to do. We've got a deployment to get ready for, and we need to focus on that. One of the reasons that I have accepted and done many interviews on this topic is to advocate for the fact that people, when they see something strange, should have a way to report something strange, not to fuel any conspiracy theories about aliens or extraterrestrial life or anything like that, but to say, as a service member, if you're out in training or if you're out on the front line, there should be a mechanism where you can report and you can register not just your own anecdotal experience, but compile it with radar data, FLIR footage, high-resolution photos, anything else that you have, and then we can build a database that then can be used to, and especially in this day and age when we have AI and such high sophisticated technology available to us, that we would be able to find those needles in the haystack and hopefully turn those things that are unidentified into identified.
I think Alex Dietrich there completely nails it, because, and this is what I've been pushing for really from day one, is that members of the Australian Defence Force, whether it be RAAF, Army, Navy, Defence Space Command, they should be afforded some sensible see something, say something reporting mechanisms. And currently there's nothing in place. There hasn't been any reporting mechanisms in place since 1996, when the RAAF said, move along, folks, nothing to see here. Currently there are incident reports that can be submitted, or occurrence reports that can be submitted if there's a close call, if there's a near miss, or if there is an incident or an accident. But there are no reporting protocols in place specifically pertaining to the UAP. And I think that is a real disservice to members of the Australian Defence Force, in that if they see something they can't readily identify or reconcile, they should be able to confidently report that and not have a fear that their observation is going to be ridiculed, or if they're going to be ostracized. And the Department of Defense is saying that, oh no, there have been no observations of unidentified aircraft for more than 20 years, yet they haven't been able to provide any documentary evidence to support that claim. And if that's the case, well, I'm not surprised that you're saying you haven't received any reports of unidentified aircraft or anomalous events, because you don't have any reporting protocols in place. 0 reports is the result of 0 reporting mechanisms. So that doesn't really come as a surprise to me. And all you really need to do is remember back to October 2023, when Ross Coulthart at a Q&A event in Sydney said this specifically, which is precisely why there is a need for sensible see something, say something reporting protocols in Australia pertaining to UAP.
Guy contacted me who was an F-35 pilot inside the Australian Air Force. And I'm probably revealing that he's one of, a couple of dozen guys in that conversation. But he wanted me to know that he'd seen anomalous phenomena. And I said to him, will you report this to your bosses? Because they're saying that they've got no evidence. And he said, what do you think? What do you think somebody like me should do when the head of my Air Force is telling a parliamentary committee that there is no evidence? He said, I'm getting the message that I shouldn't come forward with that evidence. This is the problem, is that there needs to be a free, open, transparent, unpressurized airing of this evidence, because there are so many people out there who want to provide evidence who feel intimidated about doing so.
Well said, Ross. And you can see the power and maneuverability of those F-35s in that opening package that I put from Avalon, the airshow the other days. I mean, incredibly powerful fighter jets that can do some incredible things. And if you've got, F-35 pilots in Australia saying that they're not prepared to report anomalous phenomena out of fear of reprisals and the fact that they're not going to be taken seriously, that in itself, I think, is the real risk to national security. So a couple of comments. I know that, let me have a look there. I want to go back to the Westall. Actually, before that, there are a few other comments. I want to just go through. Zane has a great acronym, WWJD. What would John Greenwald Jr. do? I love it. With respect to FOIA requests, maybe potentially on Australia and CIA engagement in the 60s. Who knows? We've got a comment from. That's certainly French, and I'm not going to try. Cuirassier Trooper Leclerc. You would have thought that as soon as the shit hit the fan, the FAA, when we're talking about the drones, would have come out straight away, but they were quiet for a long period. Obviously, we're coming up with a cover plan. Yeah, it was very interesting. And you've got great reporting from the Liberation Times and other outlets saying that, if the FAA is saying that they were all authorized FAA drones, well, why was the FAA then putting up, restricted airspace zones? Like, why was there a need for restrictions of specific airspace by the FAA? That doesn't make any sense. If it's all authorized by FAA, why is there a need for restrictions in the airspace? There's just something is very off with the official narrative that's been pushed out. UFO intros, always good to see you, my friend. Thank you for dropping in to say g'day and watching the live stream. Aaron, when it comes to the Australian government, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. It's the same with the US government. Totally agree. And that couldn't be closer to the truth than the Australian government's complete lack of appetite and engagement on the UAP topic. Zane goes on to say, with respect to the zones, Omaha is interesting and not a distant plane. Yeah, certainly. I think some valid comments there from George in that episode of Weaponized. Bex was mentioning that grating metal sound of the prop wigs me out. I'm going to mute. It is pretty distressing. I remember when I first heard that audio recording, which was probably going back a year ago now, before it had been released to the public because it was in the hands of some researchers. It's pretty chilling. If you close your eyes and you just listen to the audio recording, it's incredibly, as Jimmy says, it's incredibly chilling. And Zane, sorry, my apologies, I didn't turn the volume up as I was playing that clip. It probably would have been a little bit clearer, as you mentioned, on the clip that you were able to source, noting that he mentioned fuel-starving RAAF idle. So, yeah, certainly I agree, Jimmy. Similar sound. Obviously, it's not going to be an identical match, but, somewhat similar, even though not the same. Interesting nonetheless, and certainly the Valentich case is still an unsolved case to this very day. Zane comments, fully agree, Grant. Reporting without fear of reprisals is certainly something that is needed. And then sadly, there have been no mechanisms in place for members of the Australian Defence Force and the Australian public since 1996, the current guidance from the Australian Department of Defence is if you observe a UAP, call the cops and they'll look after it for you. And to be honest, no disrespect to the brave men and women of the police forces across this great country, but they're not briefed on UAP. What are they going to do? They're going to take your written statement, and then it's probably going to be filed into a drawer somewhere. Unless someone maybe has a very active interest in the topic themselves and out of curiosity is prepared to do some digging, I think it would just be put to the bottom of the pile. So let's move away from Alex Dietrich. I want to now jump on over to another podcast that was on recently. If you haven't subscribed to Christina Gomez's channel, do. She covers some really fascinating cases. Incredibly bright young woman, does some great research, great content. She does, I think, Mysteries with a History with Jimmy Church once a week. And they recently got together for an episode on Christina's channel where they talked about UFO encounters in schoolyards. So schoolyard UFO encounters. And quite appropriately, that they would discuss Westall as part of this episode. So let me show you a clip from this exchange between Christina and Jimmy and it's in the show notes. The link's in the show notes below. So if you're interested to watch this episode, because there's some fascinating other cases that they cover, schoolyard UFO sightings, which I wasn't aware of. But this is from the recent Mysteries with a History. I think that's what she still calls the show, where she and Jimmy are talking about the Westall incident.
Really interesting about this particular case is how the school handled it, because it was notably restrictive. You had the headmaster who instructed the students and staff to not speak to the media. I don't know how you can have that kind of authority as a headmaster, as a principal. In today's world, principals have absolutely no respect. I don't know how it took place in 66, but he was like, guys, you are not going to talk to the media. You're not even going to talk to your parents about this. Whatever you saw, never happened. But
yes,
it didn't come out like that.
For sure. And this case is one of my top UFO cases in history. And I've done a lot of research into it. So let me bullet point a few things. If you go and watch, Christina just mentioned that science teacher. Excuse me. If you go and watch James Fox's film, The Phenomenon, in that film, he features Westall, and that science teacher took a picture. Now, they confiscated his camera, but he got the picture. And in that film, James Fox's film, that picture was shown for the first time. And it's pretty incredible. So there's...
All right. So let's dispel some rumors. Now, unfortunately, Jimmy is grossly mistaken here. And I thought he would have known better, considering he's, quote, done a lot of research into it, end quote, because it was certainly covered in James Fox's Phenomenon in 2020, which I've linked in the show notes below. So if you haven't watched it, incredible documentary. Westall is covered in good detail. But Jimmy, unfortunately, is grossly mistaken with respect to it wasn't Andrew Greenwood that took a photograph. It was actually another science teacher. And the photograph that Jimmy is referring to is actually not directly related to the Westall incident. So let me show you specifically what I'm talking about here. So this is the clip in question. So this is Andrew Greenwood, who was a 20-year-old science teacher on the day of the Westall incident, 6th of April, 1966. And he was revealed for the very first time, not on camera, just from a behind shot, but he was featured in James Fox's documentary, The Phenomenon. And this is his introduction in the documentary. And I should correct myself there. Andrew Greenwood had previously come forward in, I think, the years or within the year of the Westall incident happening. He actually went on the record with James McDonald for an audio interview. But that clip that you just saw from James Fox's phenomenon was the first time that he was prepared to go on camera, even though he didn't show his face. It wouldn't be years after that, I think in 2022, when he sat down and went on camera with Ross Coulthart for a documentary that he did for 7 Spotlight. So just correcting Jimmy there, it wasn't Andrew Greenwood who took a photograph. He was certainly the science teacher on the day that observed the Westall flying saucer in the sky above the Westall High School, but he wasn't the teacher that took a photograph. That was rumored to be, or alleged to be, I believe, Miss Robinson, or something to that effect was her name. Now, the photograph that Jimmy is referring to in that exchange with Christina Gomez is referenced in the phenomenon, and I'll play this clip for you. It's actually from a separate incident that took place 4 days prior to Westall. It's called the Baldwin UFO, and this was how it was introduced in James Fox's The Phenomenon. I was interested in there. Why would officers make that disclosure to that gentleman? What's in there? Why is it in their interest to disclose that information? To disinform? What? How does it benefit secrecy by disclosing that information to that individual? I don't know. That's just something that I thought about just then watching that. The Baldwin UFO has been heavily contested, hotly debated. It is still, I think, very much, for some, they're undecided. For the debunking community, like Metabunk, they have actually done a debunk of the Baldwin UFO. I mean, I think some out there, Charlie Wise has even suggested it might have been a hubcap that was thrown into the air and photographed. I honestly don't know, but I think it is a bit of a stretch to connect Westall to Baldwin because of the fact that it does not, the physical characteristics of the Baldwin UFO in that photograph did not match the characteristics of the Westall flying saucer object that people described. It looks somewhat different. Obviously has that little dome on the top, but it was more like 2 saucers put together. And there are drawings, depictions of what some of the children saw of the Westall flying saucer. And I don't think, Jimmy has unfortunately made the connection there that the Baldwin UFO was what the children and Andrew Greenwood observed in the sky above Westall, and that photograph was from Westall, and that's completely inaccurate. So some way come at me and say I'm hating on Jimmy Church. I'm not. I'm just correcting the record because he has a pretty significant audience. I've got a small audience, and I want to set the record straight on that one. Let's continue on with Christina and Jimmy's exchange in that episode. They go on to talk about the Westall incident and even a little bit more about the Baldwin UFO, which is quite interesting.
And there is a documentary called Westall 66. The image that is up on the screen right now, this is one of the images from that film. They've got a bunch that are really great. That film is so compelling. It's one of the best UFO documentaries you will ever see, and I highly recommend it. A lot of stuff is revealed in that film, and just to touch upon some bullet points, that flying saucer, after it took off from the school, went to the center of town and landed in the town square on the street. Multiple witnesses saw this. It sat.
I got to stop Jimmy there. I've never, ever heard anything of that nature. I've never seen any credible reports. So I think he's pulling that one out of his backside there. I've never heard of that before, that it was reported to have landed in the town square. Whether it's the Baldwin UFO or the Westall UFO, I'm not aware of anything of that nature ever being reported. So Again, I don't know where Jimmy's getting his information on that one.
They're on the street in the middle of the town square, right? You got the court building, the clock tower, the whole, right? And then it took off and flew away. We also have the military involved with this case. Not only do we have all of the students and the witnesses, but how they traveled off of they were outside recess when this happened. So you did have 200 students outside. What happens when something like this goes down? Well, they break off into groups. They're running in different directions. They saw all kinds of things. The disc would alternate between moving quickly, that some of the witnesses said it almost teleported. It would go poof, poof from one spot to another, and then it would stop and hover almost completely still. Now, the students then, some of them, they broke off into groups. They go inside the school and they're yelling and screaming, "Get outside, there's a flying saucer." And they did. The school emptied along with teachers and the principal and everything else. The UFO eventually descended in the woods over this little hill. And the kids went up on this ridge, a group of them were looking through the fence, and the military arrived. And they saw jeeps, they saw military personnel. Don't know if they were Australian or the United States, because the U.S. Air Force had a facility there in Australia at the time. And one of the next things about this case for me is that they went to the local news. They came in and interviewed. The newspaper was there too as well. But the local news came and interviewed witnesses. Years later, they go back to that TV station to find the footage of the interviews from 1966. And guess what?
What?
It was gone. And
dun, dun, dun.
dun, dun, dun. And here's the crazy thing. In the video that I have seen of the employees of the TV station going through the library of tapes, they go in, dot, 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 dot. Everything is there except for Westall in 1966. Everything is there. It's dated. It's in chronological order. Everything but Westall. It is one of the most fascinating cases. There is so much here.
I totally agree with those last comments. It is a fascinating case, and there are so many rabbit holes with Westall. Don't completely agree with Jimmy's position there, but he captures some of the overarching themes well. But he does make a good point that the documentary by Rosie Jones that features researcher Shane Ryan has really been the lead researcher on Westall now for more than a decade, for a long, long time, and he continues to take lead investigator and research on Westall. He has certainly been a great source of information for me. And so this, if you haven't seen the documentary Westall 66, I would highly recommend it. It is a wonderful documentary. It actually got me really motivated to do my little documentary, The Westall Witnesses, and having had an opportunity to engage Shane directly. So I'll play the trailer for you for those of you that have not seen Westall 66. I believe it's readily available for you to rent, or even you might be able to watch it on YouTube for free. I'm not entirely sure, but I've linked the trailer in the description below. So if you do want to at least find where to watch it, you can via the trailer, I believe. So let me play this for you. There we go. And I'll just pull this up. I just got to find it. Whoops, wrong one. So this is from Westall 66, a suburban UFO mystery.
This boy come running in and say, Mr. Greenwood, there's these things in the sky, these things in the sky.
We looked up and we just saw this saucer type thing taking off. This is the biggest mass UFO sighting in Australia, yet it seems to have been suppressed, deliberately kept out of the public view.
That afternoon, our principal called a special assembly and told us all not to talk about it.
The headmaster says, "Oh, you kids are nuts. It's a weather balloon."
I was prepped to tell the students that what they'd seen didn't exist.
All I know is what I saw, and what I saw has never been explained.
After a while, trucks turned up with, it looked like army trucks.
Right.
And there would have been about 20 guys got out.
In uniforms?
Yeah.
We had no idea what we were walking into. We didn't know what those army men were doing.
It was 20 metres across with the dome in the middle.
Sometime after that, it was all burnt.
You asked me whether an R&D establishment would destroy evidence. Yes, of course they would.
I was told that she'd been taken away in the ambulance, and that was the last time I ever saw her.
What I saw, I believe, is what a flying saucer has left behind.
So I think it's available on DocPlay. Again, link in the description below. So if you haven't seen Westall 66, do check it out. It was done over a decade ago. So folks these days are a little bit, probably look a little bit older and grayer, but it's all of their testimony from a lot of the primary witnesses. So one of the comments that came through, Mr. T, going back to the fact that the Australian Department of Defence doesn't have any reporting protocols in place for UAP. Who do you recommend to tell about it, Grant? So I would say a member of the general public that sees a UAP, or if they're a member of the Australian Defence Force, rather than call the cops, report it to a reputable civilian UFO organization, the likes of MUFON. Roger Stankovic, who is the managing director, he's the head of MUFON for Australia and New Zealand. He has a good team of field researchers, field investigators. I know one of them who's an incredible, intelligent investigator, and obviously, is very, very interested in the topic and receiving and investigating cases. So that would be my recommendation. Think of what you will of MUFON. I still think that they do a good job, and you're probably better off submitting it to the likes of MUFON rather than the likes of Enigma, because you get a field investigator assigned to your case to interview you, call you, talk to you, and get some additional information other than what you just submit in writing as a report via their website. Dream Arcade. Yes, saw a series of wild flashes in the sky the other night that made no sense after running through numerous explanations. Turned to my partner and said, well, who do we call? It's a really good question. And unfortunately, this is what Canada Canada Project is making a recommendation to the Canadian government that it implement an investigatory body that can take reports from the general public. And I think that was recommended by the chief scientist in Canada. Now, whether that recommendation gets adopted by the Canadian government, who knows? But at least there would be a mechanism available to the general public in Canada to report an observation of a UFO to an investigatory body that's funded to do so. Unfortunately, the US doesn't have that. Obviously, AARO is looking to introduce a reporting mechanism for the general public, but hasn't been made available as of yet. Currently only takes reports from government employees or those that government contractors and government employees, predominantly in the military, but doesn't take reports from the general public just yet. Now, Australia doesn't have anything in place. If you're in the Defence Force, go to the cops. If you're a general public, go to the cops. So my recommendation would be go to a reputable civilian organization, again, the likes of MUFON, or there are some state-based organizations you can look up on Google and find their contact information. Bex, no government department wants to do the paperwork. That's probably true, considering if you look at, and I know Jimmy's gone through a lot of the National Archives Australia files, when the Royal Australian Air Force did have, they were charged with investigating reports of UAS, unusual aerial sightings, that there was a ton of paperwork that was generated and some very interesting, some very fascinating reports that were formally documented. But again, a lot of paperwork. But in this day and age, you think if reports can be submitted electronically, and like Alex Dietrich was saying, not just the anecdotal report, but corresponding and corroborating data points, data sets, then you use the power of AI to try and analyze that data, mine that data, and come up with trend analysis and so on. I think you could certainly use technology in this day and age to minimize the amount of manual analyst work that needs to be done. Even though you'd still need a good set of human eyes on it, you could certainly use the power of AI to fast track a lot of the analysis. We got a comment from Holy Moly, Fiddly Dang Dong, the UFO watcher, says if you report the next thing is Black Hawks over the house and Men in Black at the front door, they don't want the truth to be told. UFOs and history is all a cover-up. Well, thank you for that comment, that individual. It's appreciated, even though I don't really understand it. Zane's response, what's awesome is that the guards at Area 51 don't wear patches or anything identifying. That's interesting. So when they say soldiers without patches wouldn't happen, well, you can check. It happens now. Mr. T's comment, we can all at least say that something undeniably happened that day. Kids generally don't all conspire to tell a story with such great acting skills. I agree. They certainly saw something in the sky above Westall High School and something near the Grange about a K south of Westall High School. What it was, far out. I would love to know the answer because it's just such an intriguing mystery. And I've only scratched the surface on a couple of rabbit holes, and there are so many that you can run through and run down. Yes, I think Jimmy was way off the mark there, Jimmy. So good point. It did look a little bit like the old German Bellcraft, the De Glock. Well, not quite. It was probably more. De Glock was a bit more of an acorn shape, but interesting nonetheless. Jimmy says the Westall case has been deleted from history. Nothing written officially. Nothing mentioned in the National Archives of Australia. Not even the date, 6th of April, 1966. And I know Jimmy has been very diligent in his review of documents in and around April 1966. And I think, Jimmy, correct me if I'm wrong, there was only one report of a UFO sighting on the 6th of April 1966, but it was based in Queensland. So obviously way off the mark with respect to Westall. But nothing in the National Archives that's been located to date pertaining to the Westall incident, which is very frustrating. And yes, Bex, there was no tape in the box at Channel 9, and it's covered in the documentary Westall 66. It's an intriguing picture, such a perfect picture of a UFO. It's so clear and sharp. It's certainly an interesting photograph to look at. And I know Zane's not a fan of Metabunk, says boo. Cosmic Sand, the Channel 9 footage interviews of the Westall event mysteriously went missing from their archives too, or it could have been destroyed intentionally or inadvertently. Shane, I think, was saying that's not uncommon for that sort of stuff to happen in those days. Reels would get reused, they would get discarded. I don't think they had very strong fire retention policies back in the day. Let me see if there's any other comments that have come through. Cosmic Sand, there seemed to be a lot more interesting UFO cases in Australia back then in the 60s and the 70s. That's a good point. You got the Tully Nest incident. You've got obviously Westall. You've got the Valentich case. You've got Kelly Cahill encounter. You've got the Knowles incident. You got a lot of interesting cases. You don't really hear about a lot of cases. They certainly, there certainly have been some reported in the press. You certainly had Clark Watson. He had his encounter documented and reported in there was news.com.au only within the last year, and that was a fascinating encounter that he had up in the north, was it kind of the Central Coast sort of region, that area. And, the Central Coast is home to a lot of sightings from back in the day, the 80s. You had the, what was it, the Gosford. There was an incident in Gosford, that I haven't, to be honest, fully explored yet, but interesting cases in and around the Central Coast. Yeah, Jimmy's suggestion is a good one. I would suggest folks go through the National Archives of Australia and look at all documents, some really interesting stuff, and always appreciate Jimmy sharing what he finds, because there are some really interesting cases, and kudos to Jimmy for doing his due diligence and getting in there and reading them, because there's just so much stuff in there. Shorter Hook One, great to see you. Thanks for joining. Appreciate you joining. Feel free to watch what you missed, my friend, if you'd like to. And I'm going to try and do again. Fiddly Dang Dong, the UFO Watcher. It's nice that people are hearing their story and believing them at last. This occurs every day, but witnesses do not tell anyone. I agree. MUFON would be the best route in terms of reporting rather than to the police. And Shane Ryan did do a wonderful job with that documentary. I think he's been a wonderful ambassador for the Westall incident. And yes, it was that Queensland incident on the 6th of April, 1966. That was in the National Archives. All right. Thank you, Zane, as always, for joining, my friend. Have a great night, and look forward to chatting with you again soon. So let's now turn our focus away from the rundown. And as we kind of come to the back end of this episode, folks, we'll just talk about what's ahead, some of the things that are around the corner. And staying on the Westall train, you'd be interested to learn that only recently, Roger Stankovic and Irene Previn. Irene's done a lot of good research on the Westall incident, and Roger obviously heads up the Australian-New Zealand chapter of MUFON. They were recently interviewed together on podcast UFO, and this is just a short clip from the interview. So let me just play this, because it is quite timely with this time of year in particular, and I'll mention just the why, just the reason. Well, it's self-explanatory in this clip, so let me play this for you.
Anniversary to the Westall.
Well, the anniversary for the 59th is April 6, 1966 was the day it happened. So we usually meet up close to April 6 on a weekend. So I'm just trying to think, is it a Sunday this year? Next year we will organise the big event. So that's still a work in progress as to what that will be, and hopefully a film launch or a film festival perhaps. But once again, we'll have details of that at the Close Encounters Australia website once that is ready.
So Westall, 59 years this Sunday, the 6th of April, 1966, 59 years ago. The big one is next year, 2026, the 60th anniversary. But every year, a number of primary witnesses get down to the Grange, about a K south of the Westall High School, and get together with other witnesses, members of the public. I had the good fortune of getting down there a couple of years ago in 2023, interviewed a number of primary witnesses and put together the Westall Witnesses documentary, which you can watch on this channel if you're interested. But I'll be getting down to turn that off. I'll be getting down to the Grange this Sunday for the Westall reunion event. If there are some of you that are interested to go, feel free to come on down. It is a lot of fun. I'm going to be bringing my family down there, because there is a little park area where they've got a UFO that they've built for children to play on. So it is a fun day. If I see any of you there that are regulars in the live chat, look forward to seeing you. Others that are in Melbourne, come along, bring a picnic, bring some food. It's a good day just to meet like-minded folk, and if you're fortunate to get a question or two in to some of the primary witnesses who like to certainly share their recollections and are very, very giving of their time. So that's happening this Sunday, 6th of April, 1966. So if you're free and want to have a chat about all things Westall, come on down to the Grange. It'll be an interesting day. Hopefully the weather is a good one for it. What also is happening this month? Well, in actual fact, in just a couple of days, in really 2 days, we have the task force on the declassification of federal secrets doing a hearing on the JFK files, which will be very, very interesting to watch. And I've added in the link to the live stream, so it will be streamed on the day. And feel free to check out the. Let me just make sure I've got this so I can see it on screen. So just to read, this is the press release. Representative Anna Paulina Luna, chairwoman of the task force on the declassification of federal secrets, announced today that the panel will, this is a few days ago, will hold a hearing on the JFK files. Recently, the Trump administration released a trove of documents pursuant to President Trump's executive order titled Declassification of Records Concerning the Assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Through this executive order, President Trump took the first step towards shedding light on events that have long been obscured and kept from the public under the guise of classification. At the hearing, members will hear from expert witnesses about this historic transparency and discuss new information. After 6 decades of deception and secrecy surrounding the assassination of President Kennedy, the Trump administration is lifting the veil and giving the American people the truth. By investigating the newly released JFK files, consulting experts, and tracking down surviving staff of various investigative committees, our task force will get to the bottom of this mystery and share our findings with the American people. Our hearing is the first step, and we look forward to hearing from our witnesses, said Task Force Chairwoman Luna. So you can click on the link to be taken to the live stream. Let me actually just click on it, see if it takes us there. It will be live streamed on April the 1st. That's the US. So that will be April 2nd for us, and it'll be at 5 a.m. So that's, what's that? This week, it's 31st today. What's that? Wednesday, this Wednesday at 5 a.m. So if you're up early and you want to watch it, I will certainly be probably watching the recording. But it will be interesting nonetheless, because the witnesses, Oliver Stone, who was the filmmaker of, the director of JFK, which came out in 1991. An incredible movie with an impeccable ensemble cast. Obviously, Kevin Costner playing the lead in that film. Jefferson Morley, who is a well-respected independent journalist and author and researcher on the JFK assassination, and James DiEugeno, researcher and author. I'm very, very interested. I've always been fascinated by the JFK assassination. I've been to Dealey Plaza in Dallas. I was there in the year 2000. Have always taken an interest in the JFK assassination and the investigation. So if you're interested, do check out the live stream, or you can watch the recording. And so that's happening in just a couple of days' time. What is also happening in a couple of days' time? Well, we know, thanks to the great reporting of Matt Laszlo, that David Grusch has been hired by Representative Eric Burleson, to be on his staff, not with the task force, but a staffer of his, to essentially provide Representative Burleson with a plan, lines of inquiry, what to ask, what to look for, so that can help inform his questioning and his efforts on the task force. So April 1st, April Fool's Day, of all the days to start your job as a staffer, David Grusch will be an official staffer for Representative Burleson. And I think that is a great move, because it gives, if you recall what Jake Barber has said when he testified before, what was it, the Senate Select Intelligence Committee, or one of the intelligence committees, they really were asking him, well, what should we do? What questions should we ask? So he was going to them for help, but they needed help from him. So, and it kind of rings true with that Representative Burleson's comments that he's bringing Grusch on board to guide him on where to look, what to ask, and so on. So it'll be very interesting to see how that 4-month secondment, I guess, or that contract works out for Grusch, and what interesting questions and digging Representative Burleson and the task force can do. So let me play for you. This is a clip this is from. Let me pull this into view for you so you can see it. This is again the great work that Matt Laszlo of Ask a Poll does. He got a good soundbite from Representative Burleson. Hiring Grusch gives us the precision to do a rifle shot at UAPs. So let me play this for you.
Welcome to the Ask a Poll UAP podcast. I'm your host, Matt Laszlo, based here in Washington, where I hound the nation's lawmakers on your behalf. Thank you so much to all our subscribers. And hey, make sure and give us a like, if you like us, that is. And if you haven't yet, please consider a paid subscription to help this scrappy startup continue changing Washington one interview at a time. And now, here's our latest Ask a Poll exclusive from your U.S. Capitol.
And to echo Matt Laszlo's sentiments there, yes, if you haven't already subscribed to Ask a Poll, Matt does a wonderful job getting some commentary from and some sound bites from congressmen and women at the Capitol on this topic. So do give him a follow, subscribe, whether it's a free or paid subscription. Support the work of Matt Laszlo and Ask a Poll. He does some good job.
How you living?
Good.
You know what's interesting? I just walked across the street with Jim Hines, and I was like, do you know the name David Grusch? And he was like, yeah. So I guess he's looked into Grusch and his claims.
Oh, okay.
And Hines is top demo intel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know it.
He's Connecticut, tall, very skeptical of the issue, but that's why it was interesting that he knew the name David Grusch and that he knew his allegations, which is interesting. How
Are you okay to walk?
Yeah, wherever you need. Have you officially onboarded Grusch?
April 1.
Yeah.
So he's filling out the paperwork. You'll have to check all the same boxes that every other employee.
Yeah, right.
I joked with him. You'll have to take sexual harassment training.
Do you know about his clearance?
We were working on that. That was in fact one of my first action. As soon as he signed and we agreed, I signed a document to request that his clearance be restored.
So that's significant. There are efforts underway to try and restore David Grusch's security clearance, which will allow him to get in a skiff and share classified information with members of the task force who have a clearance and obviously a need to know as part of their role. So interesting to see that they're trying to fast track restoration of that security clearance that David Grusch once held.
First have to go through Comer because that's your committee, or does that go to Intel? Or
I sent it to. I'll have to double check with my office who it was that we sent it to, but I think we sent it to someone at Pentagon.
Oh, interesting. And so right now you just don't have any feedback on it?
No.
Are you pretty optimistic?
To me, even if we can't get his clearance, he can definitely provide strategic guidance on where to go.
Yeah.
Right. And what to do. He's going to carry out quite a bit of legwork. I mean, with it, he's committed a significant amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Usually about a little over a day a week on this. So
already,
that's what he's committed to.
And so is he going to be a full-time staffer with you?
No, part-time.
Oh, interesting. Mm-hmm. And that just comes out of your normal office budget?
Yeah.
Is that taking a hit like some of your other assistants?
Like a little bit of a hit.
Yeah.
Sure. It's not a whole lot. We basically just tried to see what would be the minimum.
Yeah.
Because he's not doing this to make money. He just wants to, roll
Yeah.
And I think that a person who's doing the work that he's going to be doing deserves to get paid.
Yeah, right.
And especially when we're expecting him to travel here to take time away from his family.
Yeah.
And I think it's appropriate for us to cover those expenses.
Do you is he going to be spearheading? Will he work with Luna and other members, or is he mostly going to be?
So the way that the rules apply, he can only work for me.
Yeah.
And if the committee decides they want to hire him or the task force, that's their. If they decide to do that, I would hope that at the end of the 4-month term that we haven't signed on for, that the committee staff would do that, but we'll see. I mean, if we're successful, it may not be necessary.
Yeah. Well, that'll be interesting. Because with Luna and the Secrets Task Force, with you having Grusch, this means you might kind of take the lead on some of this stuff. Or you see that you guys just working in tandem?
We're working in tandem. Anna is really a very gracious individual and doesn't. She's been very unselfish and doesn't. And really just kind of lifts up and it empowers the members of the committee or the task force, and I really respect that about her.
So I might leave it there. So you can listen to the rest of that clip if you want. But again, I think that's a very significant development. Grusch will be a staffer for Representative Burleson exclusively, trying to get his security clearance restored, reinstated, so he's in a position to share classified information. So watch this space, basically. I think it will be a very interesting couple of months. Even though it's a short period, 1 day a week for 4 months, I'm sure David Grusch is putting together a pretty comprehensive plan for Representative Burleson. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch that space. Let's now move away from Representative Burleson and let's talk about these gents. So we've got Lou Elizondo, Christopher Mellon. We know that David Grusch will be sitting down in a skiff at the end of this month with AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Now, will that be AARO Director, Dr. John Kozlowski? That remains to be seen. But this, again, was an exclusive from Matt Laszlo. I'll play this for you. This is on his X account. So I'll see if I can get this to pop up, so you can hear from Matt directly. Here we go. So Matt writes, news, April skiff briefing with David Grusch, Lou Elizondo, Christopher Mellon, AARO is already scheduled. More details, along with full exclusives, coming ASAP. Stay tuned to Ask Apollo's UAPs for the latest. So let's play this clip.
Grusch, Lou Elizondo.
Hey. From Matt Laszlo.
Hey, what's up, fam? Quick little update here from the beautiful U.S. Capitol on a bright spring day. Got some news for you all, some pretty big news. I just talked with Mr. Burleson about him onboarding Grusch. So yeah, that's happening April 1st. Well, then this is the news. End of April, they want to have a skiff briefing with David Grusch, Lou Elizondo, Christopher Mellon, and AARO. Luna confirmed that to me. So did Burleson. I guess Elizondo and Mellon were in town yesterday and they all met. So yeah, wait for it. I'll be dropping those exclusives here in a little bit. Also, talk to Jim Himes, the top Democrat, on Intel about the hiring of Grusch. And guess what? He knew his name and says he's looked into the allegations. I did not expect that out of Mr. Himes. He also says hi to all of you. All right.
So there you go. So skiff briefing scheduled for end of the month. I think that is significant because we know that David Grusch was reluctant to even sit down with AARO under the then leadership of Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick because he had concerns over AARO's lack of clearances that they needed to hear his testimony. So what has changed? Maybe AARO via new director Dr. John Kozlowski has provided Representative Luna with some assurances, and David Grusch with some assurances around clearances that AARO is cleared to receive classified testimony from Grusch. I'm interested to learn what has changed. Why was there this sudden agreement for them to all get together and do a skiff? Potentially, it's a good sign that it means there's a change of thinking from the AARO office under Dr. John Kozlowski. Everyone is saying he seems to be a little bit more open and willing to engage on the topic proactively than his predecessor, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. So that will be interesting to see what comes of that skiff briefing. Obviously, it will be a skiff, so we're not going to hear much about it, but it will be interesting nonetheless to hear the comments that come from Representative Luna, Burchett, Burleson, and others as they come out of that skiff or they make comments to the American public. So again, another one to watch this space on. We also have something else happening this month. This is on the 7th of April, the 8th of April for us Aussies. Skywatcher is, Jake Barber's team is releasing part 2 of its update. And I've linked their article below. It's on X if you want to have a look at it. Let's see if I can just pull it up for you so we can have a quick look at it. There it is. So this is from the Skywatcher team. So interesting development from Skywatcher. Part 2 update. Everyone, we want to share an update and address some of the questions you've seen online. We believe that Skywatcher has made real progress in understanding the phenomenon. While we can't respond to every comment, our top priority is to validate our work and then effectively share and communicate those findings with you. Upcoming releases. Releases have been slightly delayed, and we acknowledge that. We're dealing with a highly complicated subject that involves us both trying to simultaneously manage our operations and compose media that accurately communicates our progress. Despite the silence, progress has been tremendous. We are working to improve our systems and processes to communicate more effectively and moving forward. We want to share our work with you as much as you want to see it. We also acknowledge that criticism that is inherent with this topic. We don't want to put out work that we are not proud of and that we cannot stand behind. Our entire team has been working around the clock in an effort to make meaningful progress towards our objective. Here is the final immediate release schedule. The Skywatcher Disclosure Framework white paper will be released next week. Skywatcher Part 2 video is complete and will be released the following week, April 7th, so 8th for us down under. We'd also like to provide some clarity to briefly addressing some concerns we've seen online. And I won't go through those. You can read through the rest of it. But that is the key, that that Part 2 video update is scheduled for release on April 7th, April 8th for us down under. Hopefully it lives up to its expectations, and because I think the community at large has been pretty underwhelmed with a lot of the stuff that's come out to date, not just from the US government, but you don't want there to be this feeling of over-promising and then under-delivering. So let's wait and see. I'm interested to see what they're able to come up with. So so it's going to be an interesting month. April is shaping to have some interesting things. JFK assassination hearing. You've got Grusch starting on April Fool's Day. You've got Skiff hearing end of the month, and you've got Skywatcher releasing their video update on April 7th as well. So a lot of stuff happening. A lot of stuff happening in April. Let's wrap things up with a couple FOIA updates, folks. I do want to pay credit and kudos to a good friend across the pond that has done some wonderful work, some wonderful FOIA work or Official Information Act requests out of New Zealand. This was correspondence that this individual, they've redacted their information as they want to remain anonymous, from the Ombudsman, Official Information Act investigation, Minister of Defense, information relating to UAP. So this is formal correspondence from the Ombudsman, Office of the Ombudsman, Peter Boshier, which is the Chief Ombudsman, saying, thank you for your email of 11th February concerning your complaint about the decision of the Minister of Defence to refuse your request for information relating to UAP. In your response to my provisional opinion, you highlighted a public released agenda of a Five Eyes meeting. We all know about that, relating to a discussion of UAP that includes an agenda item of an update from New Zealand. You also noted information indicating that New Zealand Defence Force representative attended this meeting. You further referred to a statement by the Pentagon from June 25th, 2024 that confirmed that there is an ongoing communication between the United States and other Five Eyes nations on the UAP issue. You believe this means that the minister must hold some information regarding UAP. I queried the minister on this and received a clarification that the minister does not hold information on all meetings attended by all members of the New Zealand Defence Force, especially those held at the working level. Further, the minister stated that the United States, stating that there are discussing matters with Five Eyes partners, does not necessarily mean that they are discussed with all partners. I don't quite understand that. We know New Zealand was represented. As noted in my provisional opinion from 11 February 2025, I'm satisfied the minister took reasonable steps to search for information in scope of your request before refusing your requests, blah, blah, blah. So interesting that the key decision maker, the Minister for Defence, has no idea what is going on with New Zealand attending a briefing on UAP by the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Just completely gobsmacking, and I suspect that is the same for the Minister for Defence, Richard Marles, in Australia. I would not be surprised if he has absolutely no idea what's going on. And much like the Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, when he was in the position, had no idea that Australia attended the Five Eyes Forum. And, almost a year after that defence representative attended, he's now asking urgently for bullet points and key takeaways from that meeting. Well, why isn't he being informed as soon as after it happened of what the summary is of that meeting? If there's anyone, again, that has a need to know, it's the Chief of Air Force, the individual that's fronting up before Senate estimates, answering questions before senators, potentially on UAP. So is that plausible deniability? Is that done purposefully, intentionally? I don't know. But, it begs the question. This is other correspondence that was received from the Minister of Defence, Honourable Judith Collins, KC. This is also, again, out of New Zealand. This was correspondence saying, thank you for your email of 7 June 2024 requesting under the Official Information Act the following information. The questions that this individual asked: are there any plans to establish a New Zealand government-led UAP task force in alignment with the current approach being taken by the United States? For example, AARO, the US government's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. 2, is the New Zealand government sharing UAP data with other five nation governments, the Five Eyes? For example, radar, sonar, imagery, and New Zealand military eyewitness accounts. 3, does the New Zealand government have any plans to declassify historical UAP data to share with the public? 4, what is the current advice being given to the New Zealand Defence Force regarding UAP? For example, if a New Zealand Navy vessel encounters a USO in New Zealand waters. 5, does the New Zealand government view UAP as a potential security threat? For example, if a UAP crosses the flight path of commercial and military aircraft. The crappiest of all crappiest responses. No such information of this nature is held by me. Well, you're the Minister for Defence. You should be in a position where you're able to answer these questions that are being posed to you by concerned citizens and constituents. Additionally, the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment and New Zealand Defence Force have no role or responsibility in recording UAP, and any received reports of UAP are passed directly to the Civil Aviation Authority. Now, that's interesting. Any received reports are passed directly. Does the Civil Aviation Authority have any mechanisms in place to follow up on those reports? I have no reason to consider any other government agency holds such information. I'm therefore refusing your request, blah, 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 blah. Disappointing response that, the questions weren't satisfactorily addressed. This is also additional correspondence. This is again from the same individual. Again, not resting on their laurels there. Continued with a follow-up correspondence. This is on the 11th of July. a response to correspondence that was received by the Minister for Defence on the Defence Minister on the 11th of July. Thank you for your letter received by Office on 11 July in which you requested pursuant to the OIA following information. I kindly request to view documents 22nd of May 2023 to present day that you are able to access in your role as Attorney General, Minister of Defence, GCSB, NZSIS, Science, Innovation, Technology and Space. That's a lot of roles for one individual, obviously New Zealand being a small country. And as a member of the Intelligence and Security Committee, which clarify what UAP information the New Zealand government is sharing with the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance and what the specific areas of mutual interest and concern are. I have not received any such information and therefore your request is declined pursuant to Section 18E of the Act as this information does not exist. So pathetic responses that the Defence Minister in New Zealand is not engaged, has not been shared information on this topic. And I would say probably because they don't care. They're not interested. They don't see it as an issue. Again, move along, folks. Nothing to see here. UAP is a US issue. It's not a problem for Kiwis. It's not a problem for Aussies. And I don't think that's the right approach to take, unfortunately, with the UAP issue. Let's move on to another FOIA document. This one, across the pond. This was from the US, the Department of the Navy. So I went after, I kindly request a copy of the complete written transcript for the original gimbal UAP video recorded in its entirety by US Navy FA-18F Super Hornet fighter pilots off the east coast of the United States. Because it's long been rumored, Ryan Graves, and I know Dan Warren's been diving into this along with Adam Goldsack, that, it's rumored that there is a 4-minute video of the gimbal incident. What happened to the other 4 minutes in addition to what has been circulating? That's never been verified. So if that exists, you think that, the Naval Air Systems Command, which is the command that is, if you go to AARO's website, let me see if I can give you a quick example. If you jump on over to AARO's website and you have a look at official imagery and you come down to the gimbal, you've got Nav Air. So Nav Air is the Naval Air Systems Command, right? And so they're coming back to me saying our search for records included files maintained by NAVAIR, Naval Air Systems Command, FA-18 Program Office. However, despite this diligent search, we're unable to locate responsive documents. So you would think they would be the ones that would be in possession of a transcript of the gimbal video if there were any efforts to investigate that particular incident. But there's nothing within the holdings of the Naval Air Systems Command, which is frustrating and somewhat of a bit of a concern. Does that mean a transcript doesn't exist? Not at all. It may suggest that it just does not live with Naval Air Systems Command. It might have been investigated by another investigatory body within the Navy. Who knows? So at least, it was just an avenue that I thought was worth exploring. Last FOIA document I want to share with you is I've been going after historical documents, requesting intelligence documents through the National Archives of Australia. So any documents that are older than 20 years that have not been released by ASIO, the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, the Defence Intelligence Organisation, DIO, who else you got? Australian Signals Directorate, all of the intelligence agencies that are exempt from FOIA. After 20 years, you can request their records. And if they no longer, those records and no longer really hold any national security value, they can be disclosed. So I requested, I went after, what was the request? Let me just refresh my memory so I can tell you what the request was for. Crap. I think it was. I'll tell you. Crap. Anyway, I went after documents. No, not the one. I'm seeing if I can do a quick search. Is that it? No. Anyway, so I went after records within the holdings of the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation that between a specific date range that looking at keywords of UFO, flying saucer, unidentified flying object, unusual aerial sightings, and so on. And so the let me see where I can find it. ISD. I'm trying to see if I can. I want to read the right. This might have been it. Here we go. Yeah. So my request was I kindly request a copy of all Australian Signals Directorate and Defence Signals Directorate documents of the period 1st of January 93 to 18 June 2003 that contain any of the following keywords: UAB, UFO, and so on. And so I submitted that request. I don't know why it took so bloody long. I submitted this in June of 2023, came back on the 25th of March saying that they had some documents that they were provided to them, the National Archives of Australia, but some of them were going to be refused due to national security restrictions. So the decision was this item is open with exemption under 33(1)(a), D, and G of the Archives Act for the reasons set below. 2 folios, folio 1 and 58, are partially exempt from public access. All other folios in this item are wholly exempt. Now, I don't know what the other folios are and why they would be fully exempt. It could potentially have to do with this. Section 33(1)(a) of the Archives Act provides that a record is exempt from public access if it contains information or matter the disclosure of which under this act could reasonably be expected to cause damage to the security, defence, or international relations of the Commonwealth. The other ones that are of interest, the public disclosure of this information and other relevant details could be used by organisations or individuals of national security interest to take countermeasures against security operations. These are real and substantial grounds to conclude that it would reasonably be expected to cause damage to the security of the Commonwealth. So that was basically the statement of reasons that I got. So what was the document? Well, again, don't get overly excited. It's nothing too dramatic, but I just found it to be an interesting document nonetheless. This is the document that was released. So National Archives of Australia, total number of pages is 5. Personnel, security contacts by defence personnel with foreign representatives. Okay, so that was the statement of reasons that I've just read. And sadly, there's only really 2 pages or 1 page that's of value. So Defence Signals Directorate. Sorry, I said ASIO before. It wasn't ASIO. Defence Signals Directorate, which is now, I think, Australian Signals Directorate. Previous parts, a new part, title Security Personnel Contacts by Defence Personnel with Foreign Representatives, Contact Reports. Some information, the requesting officer has been redacted, obviously to protect their privacy and their role. Signature, redacted, and security class has been redacted. So I don't see anything else here that would reveal anything. There's a big redaction at the top here. I'm not too sure what that could be. And then there's all these occurrences with date and times that they occurred, occurrence, what the action was. Names have been redacted, obviously protecting the privacy of those individuals. But this is the one that they found this document. This matched the scope of the request, obviously matching the keyword of UFO. Now, again, nothing too significant. It says on the 24th of July of 2001, at approximately 3:50 in the afternoon, possible disturbed person. At marginal time, someone of Ainsley Village, so does that mean a retirement home village? They're an elderly person, attended Northgate entrance and requested that an envelope detailing UFO sightings in the ACT between 1984 and 2001 be delivered. Someone, name, appeared to be very nervous and told me that he had been to defence recruiting So maybe it's not a retirement village. I really don't know. I'd have to look what Ainslie Village is. Been to defense recruiting, and that he had been advised to bring the envelope to Russell. Russell is a suburb in the ACT. He provided ID comprising an ACT proof of age card. If they've got a proof of age card, maybe they are elderly in nature if they don't have a driver's license. Number, name, he was restless and could not stand still for the time he spoke. Letter accepted and SPSO advised. Request that incident reports be submitted. Incident report submitted. So I'd be interested to learn what that incident report has to say, because we don't really get much out of it. Now, was that just, you know, some person that, you know, was senile, elderly, you know, thought they had maybe had an interest in the UFO topic in their younger years, thought they had some information, wanted to pass it on, or is there something to it? So, and it's interesting that that is the only information that has been released in this document, because again, you've got this reference that, where is it? All other folios in this item are wholly exempt. So what we got, folio 1 and 58. Well, what folio is this I'm looking at? This is folio number 1. So this is, I imagine, this folio 1. Well, what's in folio 58? Why is, you know, what's it says folio 1 and 58 partially exempt. Well, we've seen folio 1. How many folios are there in total? It's not entirely clear, unfortunately. Or is that folio 1 and this is folio 58? I really don't know. It's very confusing. But anyway, that was just an interesting find. Nothing significant. Would have been nice to be able to get a sense as to what was included in that envelope that gentleman had handed over to people at the entrance gate. Could have been just something that was non-important. It was just from a disturbed person. That was what their assessment was. Possible disturbed person, but who knows? And it was at a time when there was no recording or reporting protocols in place. So could have just been they thought that, oh, this guy's into UFOs, he's wearing a tinfoil hat, let's just ignore him, you know, say we've taken his report. Who knows? So interesting nonetheless. That's pretty much what I wanted to share with you in this episode, folks. We are going to get under 3 hours, which I'm stoked about because I know I've been going a long time. I do want to give you an opportunity to have your comments read out, though, and shown. So let's go back a couple. Cosmic Sand mentions Preston Dennett has a great book on schoolyard UFO counters. Yes, he does. I haven't read it, but I know he does cover a lot of schoolyard cases. And I believe Westall is included there. I'm not too really sure. Shorter to Cook one. I don't know. I'm not aware of Ross setting up a reporting mechanism. He's got an organization that he's part of, NHI, the what's it called again? NHI Institute. Just got to. Can't. The NHI, I think it's the Non-Human Intelligence Research Institute in Australia. I think that's it. NHRI. Anyway, but I don't believe he has any. I'm not aware of any reporting mechanisms that Ross has ever talked about. Implementing, so not too sure on that front. Shorter Cook one goes on. There was a UFO seen on the Central Coast. Wasn't there? That was you weren't there for it, but there was a big story. I'm keen to dive into some of the Central Coast sightings. There was a guy right now in Kiama who documents them. Interesting. So, and above and beyond National Archives of Australia, Trove Newspapers is also a good resource for historical articles on UAP. Good morning, UFOs here. Oliver Stone is an interesting witness for sure. Yep, we'll certainly be looking forward to seeing what he has to say. And I know Aaron is a little on the excited side as well. I think he's a wonderful filmmaker. Oliver Stone's done some great films, and I know he's very very comprehensive and detailed with the research that he does. So one of my favorite films, JFK, that he put out. So don't agree with the entire narrative that he put together, but very, very interesting. And I say a lot of the stuff that's in Oliver Stone's JFK has actually been validated by a lot of the documents that have come out over the years. So Raf, thank you for joining, my friend. Good to see you joining from X. Sure to cook one. Those refusal for information are telling. It won't stop us asking though. No, you exercise your right to information. You pay for it. You have a right to see it if it doesn't compromise national security. So go after it if you're interested to to see what the government has documented on a particular topic. MB, thanks for your work, Grant. Keep digging. Please enable closed captions on your videos. Thank you for the tip. I've never thought of doing that, so I will certainly be sure to explore that outside of this episode. Sure to cook one. Thanks for looking out. Looks like Ainsley Village ACT is social housing by the looks of things. Okay. So it could have been a younger individual social housing that would, not to kind of stereotype, but that would maybe potentially back up the assessment in that document that says possible disturbed person. Who knows? But anyway, that's what came back of that document. That's all of your comments, folks. So thank you for joining me again online for another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. Should be a very interesting month. Again, we've got the JFK files hearing in Wednesday morning at 5 a.m. We've got David Grusch starting that very same day with Representative Eric Burleson. We've got David Grusch, Christopher Mellon, Lou Elizondo, and AARO sitting down together, sharing some information in a skiff. And we also have Skywatcher releasing their part 2 video in the coming week. So an interesting month ahead, folks. Look forward to reporting back next month and hopefully getting some more documents on the Australian front. So until next time, thanks again for joining me for another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. Take care. Look forward to seeing you again. Thanks for joining me online. All the best.
If you have enjoyed this episode of the Unexplained Rundown, please consider giving it a thumbs up, sharing with your friends, family, colleagues, and social network, as well as subscribing to the channel. And if you'd like to be notified whenever the Unexplained Rundown goes live, premieres, or posts a new video, be sure to ring that cowbell.